Welcome back to my analysis on Pikmin's multiple versus modes. This video will cover Pikmin 3's bingo battle with the assumption that you, the viewer, already know how the battle mode in Pikmin 2 works. If you don't, I'll have a link below to my video I've already done on that. Otherwise, this video is supported by patrons such as Some Crazy Idiot, Spork User, Chase Pixley, and Quicksparse. And this is Pikmin 3's bingo battle. As expected from a sequel, Pikmin 3's versus mode is a natural progression from 2's, as it lifts many of its fundamentals as the basis of 3's bingo battle. Red and blue teams that can have a max of 50 Pikmin each? Check. Cherries you can bring back to roll 1 of 12 items? Check. A capture the flag element in the form of a colored object you need to steal from your opponent's base? Check. Pikmin chanting when a player is about to win? Check. So when talking about bingo battle, I will be highlighting what's different, opposed to reiterating how things work if they're the same. Pikmin 3's bingo battle has Alf pitted against Olimar, with the ultimate objective to get a bingo, although the other win conditions from 2 also return. Captain down, Pikmin extinction, and stealing a colored item from the opponent's base, this time being a macaroon. Obvious difference here, as the name would imply, is the bingo board itself. Honestly, this is such an ingenious idea that I swear only a developer like Nintendo could come up with. The way that it works is that each player will have a 4x4 bingo board that will generate at the start of every match, populated with items and enemies that can be found throughout the stage. Even though the order of items on the bingo board will be reshuffled every time you play a match, the things on it will be predetermined for whatever stage variation was loaded. Anytime you carry back an item, the corresponding slot on the bingo board will light up. So if you got a picture of a Bulborb on your board, you gotta kill it and retrieve its body to fill out that slot. Of course, much like traditional bingo, filling out a complete line, whether that be horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, secures a win. While Pikmin 2 did a damn fine job setting the stage on how a versus mode would operate, it's 3 that threw that curveball, adding another layer of complexity and strategy by implementing bingo into a competitive RTS. Like, what the fuck? That's genius. In Pikmin 2, if your opponent was 1 marble away from winning, there was a bit of strategy in deciding whether to continue carrying out whatever you're working on or to cancel everything so you can have your full squad try to stop that final marble from being retrieved. It worked, but it was fundamentally basic. With the bingo board angle, however, there's so much more to consider. The 2 players have different bingo board arrangements, so what items will be most valuable to them at any given time will usually be different. It's pretty instinctual to just grab anything you come across when playing Pikmin, but a lot of the strategy comes from not only prioritizing what you need opposed to grabbing everything you see, but also identifying what items are most important to your opponent. If you come across something that isn't on the row you're trying to clear, but is on the row your opponent is trying to clear, it might be worth going out of your way to take that opportunity away from them, because in most cases, there will only be one of each item on the map. So if there's only one orange and you get it first, your opponent can no longer get a bingo on a row that had an orange, which can change their whole game plan when they now have to clear a different row to win. One of the few downsides to the bingo format is that while it can make matches more dynamic than 2, it can also make them more unfair. When your opponent gets an easy line consisting of a couple of things that spawned right next to their base, like female suregrubs or small bulborbs, it can leave you feeling cheated. Although that's nothing compared to these marble boards. Some maps have variants where like 75% of your bingo board will be one of 3 color marbles. So anytime you bring back a marble, a completely random slot on your board gets filled out, which basically throws the whole game up the chance. Marble shenanigans aside, a super easy solution I really wish they would have added that could have mitigated the whole easy bingo thing would be to just have a setting that required players to get a double or triple bingo on their card. Speaking of settings, you can once again set the amount of Pikmin each player starts with, this time going down to 1. You can turn on or off the capture the flag-esque victory macaroon if you just want to simplify matches to just the bingo element. And lastly, you can choose to play with 1 or 2 captains, Alf being partnered with either Brittany or Charlie, and Olimar being teamed up with his troublesome co-worker Louie. Unfortunately, unlike the other modes, there is no go here function, which is unironically my favorite control feature Pikmin 3 added. Due to that, dual captains in versus is most useful in the fact that you can throw your captain over walls to take shortcuts. I actually like its implementation here in versus more than I do the main game. In story mode, it's either a mechanic that forces you to regroup and stop multitasking, or in worst case scenario, a mechanic that keeps rearing its ugly head anytime you're trying to rapid fire all your Pikmin only for the game to select one of your captains, in which you accidentally throw and then they're like, oh god, please help me! Unless you're trying to break the game or something, I can't think of a single scenario where you would want to use it, outside situations where the game makes you use it. But in bingo battle, the feature is exclusively something you never need to use, but will genuinely want to use on certain maps. The mechanic makes a lot of sense here in versus, and if I didn't know better, better, I'd probably think it was specifically designed for bingo battles. Like for instance, you got a map like this where the rest of your Pikmin spawn behind the gate you need to break. You'd normally have to break it down before you can pluck them all. Or, with the dual captains, you can throw one over the ledge to get a head start on plucking without needing to break down the wall. Great implementation. As for the maps, we got 12 here, and the visual variety is really well done. In fact, there is actually more stage variety in bingo than there is in the main game. In the main game, it was limited to nature levels that represented the 4 seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. And then Formidable Oak was like a tree stump of a cave that looked like all the other caves you explored up to that point. But in bingo, they made level themes just for this mode. Of course, you got your typical cave and garden stuff, but you also got giant block castles, children's sandboxes, those weird rusted hallway stuff from 2, giant gutters, puzzle playmats, someone's garden in a similar vein to the first area of Pikmin 4. Pikmin 2's Versus mode did a good enough job, given it just used the cave themes from its story mode. Obviously, they found other ways to make the stages feel distinct, but it was still a restriction I think held it back. Conversely, Bingo Battle really excels in this area. All 12 maps feel very distinct, both aesthetically and mechanically speaking. The biggest downside is that 1, obviously there's no randomly generated stuff. And 2, the stage variants aren't nearly as drastic as 2's. In 2, even with the pre-made layouts, you could pick the same level twice and get 2 completely different layouts. Whereas here, the 3 variations per stage return, but instead of changing the layout itself, they only change what enemies and objects spawn. Even the onion locations are the same in all 3 layouts, with the exception of a single loadout in the map Buried Pond for whatever reason, where your base can spawn in the corner instead of by the pond. Not sure why that's the only exception. Even not having random generation aside, changing just the base spawns alone could have really made each variant feel distinct. But what are you gonna do? Honestly, all that is a small price to pay because I do prefer the stage variety in 3. One of the biggest advantages this has over 2, and even 4, is that every map in Bingo Battle will have at least one variation with 2 Pikmin types the map is built around. Whereas Pikmin 2 gave player 1's reds and player 2 blues. Both players in Bingo Battle will be able to use 2 different types of Pikmin, albeit Alph's Pikmin will have blue leaves and Almer's red. This addition alone adds a ton of strategy. Obviously, utilizing the strengths of various Pikmin types is a huge part of the meta of any Pikmin game, and that alone adds depth. But by having 2 types, you need to plan out what Pikmin you want to make more of, and build your strategy around that. Because no matter what, you still got that finite cap of 50 Pikmin you can make, but you can prioritize to make more of one type over the other. For example, there was a match I played with my cousin on Stagnant Sea where we both started with reds, which he prioritized since they're better at combat, and since we started with them, it was easier to grow their numbers quicker. I instead ignored reds and chose to build my number of blues, which gave me the upper hand since if I brought an item into water, which the map has a lot of, I basically couldn't be contested. The inclusion of 2 Pikmin types in a stage is an important thing to note here, because a single type wouldn't change individual strategies that much. I mean, if it's a water map and both teams had blues, then that water may as well not even be there. It's the design choice of having 2 types that each player needs to actively decide between in real time that gives Bingo Battle that typing strategy. Anyways, here's the map loadouts themselves. Shaded Terrace is your token small introduction stage. The bases are super close to one another, but are divided by a large bulborb. I like the predicament this creates because obviously a single bulborb isn't that hard to take down, but doing so opens this divider between your bases. And if you kill it, your opponent is going to be like right there, making that bulborb you just killed super easy to steal. Again, I love this dynamic because it's just a bulborb, but its implementation here is basically treated as a mobile wall. Great introduction stage. Stagnant Sea, as mentioned prior, is a map that is like 50% water, giving blues a significant edge here. Each player starts on a little corner island, and without blues, you'll need to build a bridge to access a majority of the map. Twisted Cavern is a twisted cavern, but only if your definition of twisted is a giant circle. Yeah, not much going on here. Although one of the variations has a bug-eyed Crawmad you'll either need to distract or kill if you want to grab the many items surrounding him. Air Metropolis is a sandbox composed of multiple sandcastles all lined in a grid. The third variant of this easily being the most interesting because not only do you have numerous cannon larvas and bombs, which is a very unsafe combination of things, but you can also find purples on this map that carry the heaviest fruits that can be found in 3, and there's even a burrowing snagret in the center of the map. Honestly, this is probably the deadliest loadout in Bingo Battle. Rusted Labyrinth is one I'm not a huge fan of, although my roommates seem to like it a lot. Basically, it's one of those rusty hallways over a void deal from Pikmin 2. But this one is kind of like 2 segregated maps with only one route between them to carry items. Bringing back items from your opponent's side through that single winding path is nearly impossible. So if you happen to need something on their side to get a bingo, you basically already lost. And on one of the variations, one of the sides starts with a big ass iron ball that will roll straight through the other person's base. Also, that boulder is the only way to take down the walls in the center, which means the player who spawns on that side gets to decide on when or if those walls get to go down. Pretty one-sided, but that BS has nothing on Jigsaw Fortress, which would otherwise be a cool map. I mean, it's a big old castle made up of building blocks. That being said, believe it or not, the person who starts on the top of the castle is at a significant disadvantage. You got a base on the ground and a base on the tip of the castle. The player on the ground starts with a bunch of extra planted Pikmin right next to their base on 2 of the 3 layouts, opposed to the other player who needs to go off of the castle to find theirs. So that's already a huge point in the grounded player's favor. But beyond that, having to bring shit all the way up and around the castle is such a handicap. If both players started on the ground or on the castle, this would probably be one of my faves. But as is, it's easily the most one-sided level. Blooming Terrace is a great well-rounded garden map I'm pretty sure everyone likes. It's sort of like a souped-up version of the first map. 2 routes to your opponent's base on the left and right, and a center route that leads directly to them with a couple of big bulborbs acting as dynamic barricades. Interestingly, this is the only map of candy pop buds to convert your Pikmin to another type, in this case purples. Pretty useless given there isn't that much heavy stuff on this map, and you'll find purples anyways inside a Medusal Slurker once you defeat it. Wait, is that really the name of that thing? I never bothered to learn a name since me and my roommates always just refer to it as a jellyfish, but I gotta be honest, I wasn't expecting that to be the name. Parch Brook is another map I've been indifferent to, as it fundamentally functions as a second Rusted Labyrinth in terms of design. What I mean by that is that the map is essentially split into 2 halves, and if you need an item that happens to be on your opponent's side, it's a and a half to retrieve it back to yours. However, I do prefer Parch Brook for 2 reasons. 1, the route through the center that divides the 2 bases is more than just pathing, as it contains items and enemies in reach of both teams. And 2, there is a bridge you can build to the upper half of your opponent's side, actually giving you some sort of chance at retrieving items from over there. Buried Pond is a map I don't think any of my friends really care for. It's another cave map that's essentially another circle encompassing a center pond, hence the name. A big part of its design are those slow as hell lily pads, which was like the worst part of Twilight River. As you would expect, it's not too exciting here either, and also weirdly glitchy. As mentioned, it's the only map of 2 different base spawns, which I think it was wasted on here because our next map, Sandbox Kingdom, would have greatly benefited from some other onion locations. This is a wide open sandbox map that would be super solid, was it not for the location of your base, which is on top of this sandhill. Carrying up this steep of an incline is super janky, and it makes stealing items near impossible if your opponent already has something going up that hill. There also seems to be this issue when you're inclining a slope. It sometimes won't let you throw Pikmin, even beyond the jank. Having to carry each and every item, enemy, or pellets up that mound really slows things down. Corroded Maze, other than having a marble variant, I like this one. The map is built around its frequent use of bombs and walls, and having nothing but a shallow wall between the path that you're on and your Pikmin's death makes for an interesting playing experience. Bulborbs are generally total pushovers in Pikmin 3 because you could just throw some Pikmin at their eyes to force them into their shake animation. Although on this map, that mere shake can send Pikmin falling to their death. That alone kind of forces you to play this one differently than any other map, which is why I like it. The final map is my absolute favorite, and that's Jigsaw Coliseum. Coliseum is an apt description because this map is huge, making for really long rounds. That being said, if there's any map that should have had the word maze in the title, it's this one. This is definitely a map you need to learn the layout of. Until you familiarize yourself with it, you probably won't like it. If you have a good sense of direction, you'll more than likely enjoy it from the get-go, as I did. Otherwise, it's very easy to get lost here if you're jumping in blind. Nonetheless, it is the biggest map with multiple of the toughest enemies, and a perfect end cap to the 12 stages in Pikmin 3. Overall, I like the selection here. There are some stinkers, but otherwise, I appreciate the variety on offer. Beyond maybe the 2 cave circle levels, there aren't any 2 maps that feel all too similar in terms of layout and progression. While I do prefer the map selection in Pikmin 3, I would say the biggest advantage 2 has over 3 is the random generation and the 3 layouts feeling significantly different. Also, there's no way to pick the exact variant you want in Pikmin 3, so if you want a rematch on the same loadouts, you have to keep loading the stage and backing out to the menu until it finally picks the one you want. The last big element to mention here are the items, and oh boy, we got some busted ones this time around. Items are provided via cherries once again. However, in addition, there is also a golden cherry which only appears when one of the players is really lagging behind and will completely fill up all 5 of your reserved item slots. The 5 item slots might fool you into thinking you can hold 1 more than you could in 2, but it's 5 for both games, since in Pikmin 3, the item that is currently active is your first item slot. As for what you can get, you got a +10 that sprouts 10 Pikmin out of your onion, a +5 that will sprout about 5 rare Pikmin out of your onion, aka the ones you do not start with. For the longest time, I just assumed this was a worst plus 10, but no. There is a distinction between the two items. Lightning will shock your opponent and their Pikmin, not a great item since electricity only stuns in 3, and as you would expect, yellows are completely impervious. The lucky marble will fill out a random unfilled space on your board. I should also mention this can be found in the stages themselves on certain layouts, and has a gold model of the president's head inside. Rockstorm is the most broken piece of shit ever. It will cause a handful of boulders to fall from the sky and can wipe out your entire squad with just a single rock. These can, and usually will, just end an entire game then and there. I can't tell you how many times I've been playing this with friends, and when one of us had their entire squad wiped out with a couple of rocks, we would just call game then and there.
Oh, I
have 2 Pikmin.
I just ruined Brian of the Rocks.
I just lost so many Pikmin, I don't even know what to do.
Plus, the hitboxes are super janky. It honestly shocks me this was added to the game in the way that it is. Seriously, I guarantee you ask anyone who's played Bingo Battle about the boulder item, and they'll undoubtedly tell you the exact thing I'm telling you now. It's notoriously bullshit. There's not even a consistent way to dodge the item. People online will say, oh, just be moving the whole time. But I can tell you right now, that is not the infallible strategy people make it out to be. The boulder spawns are just too sporadic, and coupled with those giant hitboxes, shit like this is bound to happen even when you're continuously moving. Even in my original review for the Wii U, which is nearly 10 years old at this point, I talked about the verses for like all of 20 seconds, and that was still something I felt necessary to draw attention to. You know, back when I used to edit videos like this.
Well, there we go. GG, that was a bunch of bullshit.
Boulders are such a huge part of the Bingo Battle meta that it makes Pinks and Rock Boys even better than they already were, since they cannot be killed with boulders, which is a huge deal. Moving on, Ultra Spicy Spray, unlike the equivalent item from 2's battle mode, will supercharge your Pikmin immediately instead of adding it to your reserves. It's important to note that using a Spicy in Pikmin 3 will also cause your Pikmin to bloom into flowers. It should also be noted that supercharged Pikmin aren't any more effective at fighting opponent Pikmin in Pikmin 3. Or if they are, the difference is so negligible. My cousin and I couldn't tell a difference when testing it. The enemy annihilator will kill every last enemy, and even pellets that are on your screen. Another insanely good item. The bomb will spawn a bomb on your captain for your Pikmin to use. The shuffle will rearrange your opponent's entire bingo board. This item is a bit rarer than the others, but it can prevent your opponent from winning in the event that they are carrying back their winning item. It can really come in clutch. The mine is the same as the bomb, except instead of going off when your Pikmin drops it, it will only trigger when a player goes near it. The case uses for the mine, or the time bomb as me and my roomies refer to it, are pretty niche. In most scenarios, I would just prefer a standard bomb, as needing to go near this thing can put you and your Pikmin at risk in the event that something goes wrong. But it does have a few advantages. You can stick it to elevated or flying enemies, which, while said enemies are rare in bingo mode, it can be handy if you're able to make use of it. It's also not a bad strategy to plant one of these suckers at your opponent's base, and then have this happen when they come back. The warp item is pretty hit and miss. It teleports your opponent and any Pikmin they have with them to a random spot on the map. It's best used when you and your rival are head-to-head fighting over something, as you can get them to back off even for just a sec. Other times though, it's not unlikely to warp them to the exact spot they want to be. I would say the map where it's consistently devastating is Jigsaw Coliseum, simply due to the sheer size of the stage. The final item is the Macaroon recovery, which I always forget is even in the game since I usually play with the Macaroon turned off. It's similar to the marble return from 2, except instead of bouncing your item back to your base, it simply teleports. On the subject of the Macaroon though, probably the biggest difference between it and the colored marbles from Pikmin 2 is that you can actually carry your own Macaroon back to your base. Just like Pikmin 2, 3 likewise had a few items cut during development. The cut items were a standard +5 that actually would have just been a worse +10, since it just provided 5 more of the type you started with. A flower that presumably would have bloomed all your Pikmin to flowers, much like the item seen in 2. It makes enough sense that they cut this, since the difference between a leaf and a flower Pikmin is not very significant in Pikmin 3. And also, unlike 2, using a Spicy blooms your Pikmin anyway. There was a Rockstorm item, except only with a single boulder, and an item called Swap, which, based on the texture, would have swapped your board with your opponent's. To save myself some comments, yes, the cutting room floor does list a 5th unused item, although based on the context clues, I don't think it was an item. All the textures for the in-game roulette items are contained in a SCS file within the directory TIMG. And while yes, that bingo fog texture is also in that folder, so is everything else. I mean, like, I think every last UI element in the bingo battle battle is in this directory. The texture for fire effects, glow effects, visual noise, everything. And considering the 4-cut items I described use the same naming convention as the items that are in the game, nh_roulettes, and then the item's name. And Bingo Fog does not use this naming convention. Leads me to believe the bingo_fog file didn't have anything to do with the roulette wheel or its items, and was more likely supposed to be another visual effect in line with the others mentioned. Unless there is some confirmation from a dev this was indeed planned to be an item, I'm calling shenanigans. Regardless, those are all the items in Bingo Battle, and while there is more variety than the 12 in 2's verses, there is also less balance. Which, hey, may not necessarily be a bad thing depending on who you ask. The enemy nuke and especially the boulders are so utterly broken, it blows my mind they made their way into the game. Some people might like the chaos, although it would have been cool to see some item options, or at the very least, a nerf for the boulder item when this game was ported to Switch. Speaking of Switch, Bingo Battle was more or less untouched during the porting process, beyond some minor things I noticed, like the player maps having noticeably more reverb. The biggest differences between Wii U and Switch are 1. The hardware itself, a mini-map displayed on the Wii U gamepad, which gave the player using that as a controller an unfair advantage. I think the original idea was that you'd both use Wiimotes, and then place the gamepad in front of you both as like a shared mini-map. A little unconventional, but here on Switch, there's now just a map you can pull up on your screen. The second change is that every enemy now has half the health it originally had. Half health would have been cool as an option, but making that change the default makes an already easy game even easier. Enemies pose no threat to you, and even the biggest of baddies can be taken down in mere seconds. But even that's whatever, honestly. To me, the biggest problem Pikmin 3's Bingo Battle has is the AI of the Pikmin themselves. Holy cow, I cannot believe how bad it is here. Most of it stems from how they interact with each other now. In the second game, all Pikmin engagements were one-on-one, stationary fistfights. At first glance, it's like, wow, that seems limiting. Pikmin should be able to move around and gang up on each other. Then you see this and realize maybe Pikmin 2 had it right all along. You can throw a single Pikmin in a whole crowd of 50, and your single dude can still knock out some of that 50 before dying itself. That's because the chasing, the dogpiling, none of it is taken into account when determining what Pikmin will win an engagement. Multiple Pikmin fighting a single Pikmin could be a cool feature if, A, they didn't all have this big traveling brawl like they're supposed to be a fight cloud straight out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. B, there was a limit on how many Pikmin could fight a single Pikmin, so that way when you throw every last one of your Pikmin into your opponent's squad, they don't all run towards this one Pikmin that's going to take them on a 10-mile hike around the map. And C, if numbers actually made a difference. If 50 Pikmin all gang up on one dude, that dude should die like... just like that. What is the point of your entire squad getting distracted by 1 or 2 Pikmin when their odds of winning is not affected? And the only thing that's really affected is how annoyed you're getting at the game. This Pikmin behavior makes stealing items back in particular an absolute nightmare. Basically 9 times out of 10 when you try to stop your opponent from carrying something by throwing your Pikmin on said thing, all your Pikmin will run off chasing a single dude, or even worse, they will help your opponent carry the item back. You could get this to happen in Pikmin 2 if the item was big enough, and you went out of your way to give space between you and your opponent's Pikmin. But in 3, it's not the exception, it's the rule. Desperately trying to stop your opponent from carrying their winning item, only to see that carry number go up because you're unintentionally helping them, is one of the most infuriating things in gaming. Like seriously, you want a game that'll just put you in a shitty mood? Then Pikmin 3 Bingo is pretty up there. Anytime you'll lose a match, you basically feel cheated. You'll lose and it's immediately like, yeah, well, it's only cause this janky thing happened. May seem childish, but that behavior comes out of literally everyone I've seen play Bingo Battle. I remember pretty recently I was playing some Bingo with a friend, and then my roommate comes in and jumps in for like 2 rounds before he got too frustrated to even play. Between items like the warp thing and the game-ending boulders, some terrible pathing. This pink Pikmin constantly do.
Oh, it's glitching again. What the f is happening? The lime.
And the just overall terrible Pikmin AI that makes it impossible to do the thing you want to do when even a single enemy Pikmin is in the vicinity. Pikmin 3's verses can drive you mad, which is why it will probably surprise everyone to hear, especially after everything I've just said. I love Pikmin 3's Bingo Battle. It is so much fun. So fun that me and all my friends are well aware of all of these shortcomings. And yet we still play Bingo Battles for hours at end, basically every weekend. I mean, There are weekends where we will play for the entire day. Check this out. There was one day where we played 65 matches all in one day. Did you know how long it takes to play 65 matches? That's like 7 straight hours of Pikmin. The reality is that 3's bingo is only as easy as it is to critique because I've unironically played like over 200 hours of it. So the problems it does have is practically engraved into the minds of my friends and I. Plus, just in general, there's so much more going on here than in 2, so of course there's more to critique. The TLDR is that Pikmin 2's battle mode is more structurally sound, but 3's is more fun, which is why it's my go-to multiplayer experience in my household. The bingo angle is just so ingeniously creative. It has led to so many great moments between my friends and I. I'm sure you're all familiar with the saying 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or a few steps forward, 1 giant leap back. Well, Pikmin 3 is the inverse of that. There are a handful of little annoyances like AI, not being able to pick layouts, bullshit items, stuff that, yeah, Pikmin 2 did do better, but 3 is still the overall superior versus experience. It might have lower lows, but it has way higher highs. I can't stress enough how addictive Bingo Battle is. This might sound crazy, but it is by far my favorite thing about Pikmin 3. The other modes don't even come close for me. If you have Pikmin 3 and a friend that also likes Pikmin, it gets a glowing recommendation from me. Seriously, try it if you haven't. With a recommendation that positive, that just leaves us with Pikmin 4's competitive mode. With that 10-year gap between 3 and 4, were they able to top what they accomplished in Pikmin 3? Well, stay tuned, because next time, we're gonna find out just that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Pikmin 4's multiplayer coverage. See ya! Hey, thanks for watching. The reason this video took so long is because my computer literally broke and I basically had to build a new one. But we're all good now, and I'll be holding a poll soon to ask you guys what you'd like to see next. Otherwise, I'd like to give a special thanks to patrons such as Evan Halbert, Some Crazy Idiot, Ian, Verzi Edits, Woomling, David Marchesi, Gameplayer 1500, Kinzo TN, Drew Kellenberger, David Pacheco, Victoria Mars, and Amanda Guth. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.